In computer networks, we are taking the chapter number 1, Introduction, and we are following a very famous book from Tenenbaum, Computer Networks. Examples of networks. Network is all about computing devices which are connected to each other, exchanging information, data. So computer networking, it has all flavors of networks. Some are very large, covering all the globe. It can be very small, like PAN, personal area network. So each network is constituted with different goals. Some can scale, that it can be incremented. Some cannot be. So we will look at different technologies which are there. The first, very important, is the internet. This is the best known network. Internet is nothing else. It is also a network. So what is the history? What is the evolution? How it evolved? And what are the underlying technology, the architecture of internet we are going to see. Okay. So we'll start with history, how it evolved, and finally the technology with the architectural perspective. Then you have a mobile, you might be calling as a subscriber, and then you'll be paying to a phone company. This is the mobile phone network we'll be talking about. This is also a very, prominent kind of network. And since mobile phone network is also providing the data, so we'll talk about that also. And then the IEEE 802.11 wireless LANs. You go to a hotel, you go to even the aircraft, now you get the Wi-Fi or the wireless connectivity of data. The internet. Internet is a very, very huge collection of different networks. Now these networks are talking in the same language. That is, they are using these common protocols. Protocols are nothing but the rules, regulations which are being already laid down and everyone is following it. And they are also providing certain common services. So internet is not planned by any single organization. There is no single organization which actually you can say that they have started it. And today also it is not controlled by any single organization like Cisco, like Google, like Facebook. No. It all started with the ARPANET. Now you need to understand how this ARPANET came into being. I'm talking about late 1950s. And this was the time when United States of America and USSR, these two giants or superpowers, they were involved in Cold War. Normal war is what? People fight. That is the armory, actual 101 fight. But in Cold War, the countries or the parties fight, but without coming face to face. So when it was at peak, United States, that is Department of Defense, every government has a Department of Defense. So here United States DOD, they wanted to have a network that is a command and control. If something happens like a nuclear war, something happens like this, they can still be talking, they can still get connected or be connected. So this was the basic intention which all started. Everything started with this. Now at this time what was happening? All the military communication, all the defense communication, they were happening on public telephone network. Normal like BSNL we have, like the different companies have different telephone, laid down backbone. So this is where this was very vulnerable. Because if you and me are talking and an army guy is also talking, it is vulnerable. We can just eavesdrop, we can blow it also, whatever we can do. So it is vulnerable. So if you see here, this picture is showing, and you see the black dots, this is representing the telephone switching offices, and each is connected to thousands of these telephones. Basically, there were certain points, you can just assume like this. There are certain points from where different subscribers were connected. And there is a toll office, there is a switching office. So it was all in public domain. Now this was all in the national hierarchy. This was all laid down nationally in United States of America. Or these switching office, they were connected to high level switching offices like toll offices. So it's all started with subscriber, then switching office, then we have toll office, and likewise. So it was a whole network which the Department of Defense were also using. If by chance some toll office or switching office they were destructed or by any means, now what will happen? These all, if you see here, these are all fragmented. So one kind of destruction at one point will isolate. You can say these are the islands on islands of network. So if one is destructed, one point will not be able to talk to other point. That is the Pentagon, which was handling all the military and the Department of Defense work, will not be able to call the Los Angeles base at that time. Around 1960, DoD, Department of Defense, they gave a contract to Rand Corporation for the solution. The solution was, if something happens, we still want to be connected, because anything can happen anytime. The Pearl Harbor has happened, Hiroshima, all these, you know about the history. Now here comes an employee. He is called Paul Barron. Now he came up with a very, very fault tolerant, highly distributed design. He said, this is my design. If something happens, if something, war or some destruction happens, then still it is quite distributed. And even if some of the, points are broken, you will still be able to talk. And this is the network he proposed. But apart from this, or you can say higher than this proposal, he gave an idea to use the digital packet switching technology. This is switching office. This is switching office. So he said that since the path between any two switching office are now longer, because he has made like this, the analog signal will definitely suffer attenuation. Analog signals like this, and because of the lack of energy, there will be some point when because he has the design of his has the points very distance apart. So he said there will be distortion. So he proposed that, okay, we will be using the digital packet switching technology. We will be sending the packets, and these packets will be divided, and these different parts will take different paths. Any part of the packet can take any path. So there will be a disassembly. Every part will go or take any other path. And when in the receiver, all these parts of a packet will be combined again. That is in the switching technology. The concept was the data will definitely reach. Okay. Now Pentagon liked this concept of Paul Barron, but the problem was AT&T. American Telephone, Telecommunication, Telegraph, I guess. So this company was the telephone monopoly at that time. So United States National Telephone Monopoly it was. The Pentagon said AT&T that kindly make a prototype based on Paul Barron's idea. But AT&T at that time, it was a giant. AT&T said, no, this is not a good idea. We don't think it is worth making. At that time, AT&T was just like the East India Company, the company which came to India and ruled for Britishers. They ruled for, more than 200 years. So, there was a change now. There was a paradigm shift. In October 1957, Soviet Union actually beat United States of America into space. in space. How? They actually launched the first artificial satellite called as Sputnik. So Soviet Union, they were able to launch the satellite, and now came Dwight, President Dwight Eisenhower. He said, what is happening? How this USSR has done it? So he just called the meeting, and then he came to know what is happening. Army, Navy and Air Force, they are actually backbiting. They are not doing that kind of work, or not that kind of motivated, because they were backbiting over the Pentagon's research budget. Everyone was saying, oh my God, Pentagon has so much of budget. And now came the ARPA. Dwight, President, said that, okay, he made a research and development organization. Now he was pointing on the research aspect. He said, we will make ARPA, that was called as Advanced Research Projects Agency. Now ARPA was just, you can say, a very small office. It has no scientists, no laboratories. It has a very small budget. So how does this ARPA work? There are different universities, there are different companies. Whosoever company or university, they have good idea, promising idea, ARPA would fund them. They would give them money. Okay, take money and do the research, and if it is worth, then we will take it, and we will use it for the defense use, like this. Now here comes Larry Roberts. Now he will come again and again. In 1967, he was the program manager at ARPA. And I just told you about ARPA. And he was trying to find out, he was doing everything, how to provide remote access to computers. That is, one computer is here, the other computer can be any other place, geographical location. He want to get hold of remote access. How to access another computer from one point. Okay. Now he talked to so many people. Now he also talked to Wesley Clark. Now Wesley Clark, he suggested him that you can make a packet switch subnet. And that is, subnet is basically a network. Now connecting each host to its own router. Host are computer, subnet is actually network. And router is a switching device. So he said that you can do it. You can do the remote access to computers. You can use the packet switch network, and then you can do the basic idea he gave, which is today being used also. Now Robert, he got very excited about this idea, and he started researching on it, and he actually wrote a paper, and he went to ACM SIGOPS Symposium on Operating System Principle, and this symposium was held at Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So this idea, he wrote a paper, but there was a surprise. He thought that this idea is very new, and I have written a paper, and when he went there, he was surprised that this idea or this paper in this conference is already been implemented, fully implemented under the leadership of Donald Davis of NPL, National Physics Laboratory in England. And NPL was not, you cannot say it is related to defense. It was just a National Physics Laboratory campus. The different computers were connected, and this was already being implemented. And moreover, additionally, Donald Davis, they have already cited the work of Paul Barron. Remember, Paul Barron work was initially discarded by AT&T. So Robert came back from Gatlinburg, and he was determined to do something to build, and that became the ARPANET. ARPANET. This was, you can say, the first internet. You can say that. Now here is a gentleman. Please look at him very carefully, because we'll be talking about him. Now coming to the plan. Now Larry Roberts and others, they have a plan. The plan was the subnet. Subnet is nothing but the communication network. The subnet will consist of many computers, and these many computers will be called as IMPs. This is what you see in the picture. This will be interface message processors. And these IMPs, will be connected to transmission lines, and that will be around 56 kilobit per second kbps transmission line. And because reliability was the key issue, every IMP will be connected to at least 2 other IMPs. Every interface message processor will be connected to other at least 2 IMPs. It can be connected to more than that. Now each packet which will be there, will be sent across the subnet. That packet will have all the information like the size, header, checksum. Along with this, it will have a full destination address. We know it today by the IP address. Now, if this full destination address will be there, even if some IMPs are destroyed, some communication line is destroyed, the packets will still be rerouted using the alternative paths, and they will finally reach. So each node of the network will consist of what? IMP, what you see here, and a host. Host is the computer, and they will be just connected by a short wire. Okay, so this is the picture when it actually came into being. It was in 1973. This is the picture. But the basic idea was an IMP. An IMP will be connected to, that will be a part of your subnet, and every node will have IMP and a host. Host is simple computer. IMP is interface message processor. Now they decided that a host can send up to 8063 bits to its MP. Host is a computer which will be connected to IMP. So it will send up to maximum 8063 bits. And since I said this is a packet, so packet will be divided into different parts. Disassembly will be done. So that will be around 1008 bits. And this 1008 bits will be forwarded to the destination independently. So different parts are there, 1, 2, 3. You can say 8 divided by say 1008. So it will be around 8 parts of the packet. And they can take any route, any part, any destination, this routing. Each packet will be, this 1008 will be coming from different points, and it will be assembled. It will be made as 8063. Then only it will be sent to other point. So this was a kind of the store and forward packet switching network. Okay, this was the first of its kind, store and forward packet switching network. Now ARPA contracted this kind of, because they have to implement it also. In December 1968, BBN, this was a consulting firm, and it was based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it was awarded this contract. BBN did what? They actually used a Honeywell DDP 316 mini computers, and it was having a 12K 16-bit words of magnetic core memory, and this was used as the IMP. Okay, don't worry about this 12K and 60-bit word. Just assume and just remember that they used a certain kind of mini computers as the IMPs, and there will be no inside magnetic memory, right? There will be no like hard drives we have or SSDs we have. So IMPs, they were connected by 56 kbps as planned, and they will be leased. They will be taken from the telephone companies. Now this BBN company, what they did, the software was, they made the software, and it was divided into 2 parts, subnet and host. So what I'm trying to suggest here is, they made the software for the subnet also, which is the communication network, and the host which will be connecting to the subnet or a communication network, they also made the software for that. Okay. So the BBN company, which was given the contract, what they did, they made or they created a software for the communication network also and the subnet also. Now what was the problem? The problem was because Larry Roberts were here. Now Larry Roberts said, I have a problem with this. The host also needs software. IMP, it's okay, I can understand. But the host also needed software. Now there was a situation. So Larry Roberts did what? He convened a meeting. He called a meeting, and he called mostly the graduate students, and the place was Snowbird, Utah, in the summer of 1969. Now he wanted to mitigate and solve this issue. So he called various students, and these students were young students, and these were intelligent students like IITs and ISCs we have. So graduate, they were very astounded because they asked for network expert, they asked for some grand design, but there was, for this whole network, there was no network expert, and neither there was a grand design, there was not a proper design. So these graduate kids, they have to figure out all the things on their own. So they did some experiment, and finally they were successful, and finally there were 4 nodes. This UCLA, UCSB, SRI and University of Utah, these are all universities, all start with U. So just remember, they are the different universities at that time in United States. So 4 nodes were connected. Okay. Now this gentleman, I told you about him, Len Kleinrock. He was actually the pioneer who suggested the theory of packet switching. So the first host to host, that is from one actual computer to another computer using this whole network, the first message was sent, and this was from UCLA to SRI. These are 2 universities, and he was actually involved in that from UCLA till SRI. Now this was as the new IMPs were installed and delivered, this network grew very quickly, and it actually spanned all over United States. So now you see in just 3 years how this ARPANET grew. You see from this A is 1969, December 1969. There are only four universities, 4 points, connecting points. Then we have 1970, July 1970. Then we have March 1971. Other universities like and the companies like RAND and BBN, these were all companies. They also came into being. They also became the part. Then came the April 1972. Again, the network was something like this. Then September 1972, then network was like this, and NOAA also and OAA also joined up. Finally, it grew very faster and it took a shape. This was ARPANET. ARPA also funded the research on the use of the satellite networks because they wanted this mobile packet radio networks. So they also funded this. I'll give an example. This was actually happened. There was a very famous demonstration. There was a big truck which you see here, and this was moving around California. And the communication was, this was using packet radio network to send the message to SRI. SRI is again a university. And when the message was sent to SRI, this message was sent through the ARPANET to the East Coast. And from this East Coast, these are all in United States. This was sent to University College in London through the satellite network. You know what happened? This was a famous demonstration. And this experiment was a success. People actually acclaimed it. But because of this experiment, certain new things came up. That now whatever protocols ARPANET is using, if there are different networks, they have also to be included. These protocols will not be fully competent. So we need more stout and more these are network friendly protocols. From here came the TCP/IP. So the invention of TCP/IP protocol, which is today's internet protocol, came into being. In order to encourage this TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol, ARPA awarded various contracts, to implement this TCP/IP on various platforms. And this contract was given to giants at that time: IBM, DEC, HP, Berkeley, Unix. IBM, HP. You might be having a laptop computer of that. Now, researchers at this University of California at Berkeley, they rewrote this TCP/IP, and they use a new programming interface, and they called it as sockets. And they have a latest release of 4.2 BSD, they called them it, and this was as I said, Berkeley Unix. So now they came up with the idea of using these sockets. And apart from this was just not sockets only. the new release, along with the socket, rewriting of TCP/IP, they also made certain program like chat program, utility program, management program, and they said it is so easy to use the sockets and then to use all these application programs also can be used. The TCP communication means one system will have socket, other system will have socket. We will open the socket and there will be a connection oriented TCP connection. When this 4.2 BSD was released, it came along. Everyone adopted it. This TCP/IP sockets and various network utilities, like as I said, chat program, etc. This was a complete package. Everyone was very happy with that. And with this TCP/IP, it was easy for the LANs to connect to the ARPANET, and this grew rapidly during the mid 1970s. So this is how internet first phase came into being. NSFNet. NSFNet is a National Science Foundation of United States. So by the late 1970s, or you can say the ending years of 1970s, everyone saw the impact and the power of ARPANET. NSF was also interested. NSF found enormous impact of this ARPANET everywhere. Okay. Now there was a catch here. ARPANET, all the universities or the institution which are connected to ARPANET, they were only those institutions which has a contract with DoD, Department of Defense. If any other university is there, if any other institution is there, it was not connected with ARPANET. Now there was a problem. So this National Science Foundation, they said, okay, we will make a successor of ARPANET and we will try to include most of the university research groups or whichever university research group which wanted to join this. Late 1980s I am talking about. So what they did as initial stage, they made, NSF created a backbone network and they connected 6 supercomputers. Centers were there. Supercomputers means those computers which has immense power and they were super in computing. So it was in San Diego, Boulder, Champaign, Pittsburgh, Ithaca, Princeton. And you see these points also, there are certain points I am showing. And this was the backbone network. Now every supercomputer was provided or was connected to a fuzzball. Fuzzball is just a computer. Okay, they just gave a fancy name to it, fuzzball. So every this six supercomputer were given a little brother, you can say, and it was LSI 11 microcomputer. It was called as a fuzzball. Now these fuzzball are now connected with 56 kbps lease line, and they formed a subnet. Subnet is nothing but a communication network, and they were using the same hardware technology which the ARPANET were using. I hope you got the idea. NSF tried to make a backbone. So the software technology was different, because now the fuzzball, it started talking from the beginning in TCP/IP. So you can say NSFNet was the first TCP/IP wide area network. Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol, wide area network. NSF funded now, because it was a government agency, and they wanted the regional networks so that they can access any of the supercomputers, the 6 points of the backbone, and they can communicate to each other. And this network was finally called as NSFNet. You can say ARPANET was the first internet, NSFNet was the second internet. You can say like that. So it was NSFNet. And it was, this NSFNet was also connected to ARPANET. In the CMU, Carnegie Mellon University, a fuzzball and IMP was there, and there was a link from this to ARPANET. So NSFNet was also connected to ARPANET, right? Now here, because as I said, whenever the things are good, people will use it. The various regional networks, various universities which were not with the contract of DoD, they came up and they connected to it. So NSFNet, when it came, it was a huge success, instantaneous success. So what? Because NSF was just a simple, a government company. So they gave a contract to Merit, Michigan-based Merit Consortium. And NSF also encouraged various giants like MCI, IBM, Merit to form a non-profit corporation, and it was then called as ANS, Advanced Networks and Services. And this was the first step of commercialization of the internet, today's internet. Okay, so these big companies, they formed ANS, and in 1990, this ANS, Advanced Networks and Services, it took over the NSFnet and it upgraded the 1.5 Mbps line to 45 Mbps. Now ANSNet is 45 Mbps. So this ARPANET, NSFnet, now ANSNet. After 5 years, this ANSNet was sold to America Online. But at this time, everyone was into this. So there were various companies which were actually offering various IP services, commercial IP services. Now there has to be a transition. The government hand, it has to go to the private hand. So basic idea was to connect all the network, regional network, and they can communicate. For that, National Science Foundation, it awarded the contract to different network operators. And they said, okay, establish a NAP. NAP is Network Access Points. So now there is a commercialization going on. Previously it was ANSNet, it was America Online it took, and now there was these four I am showing you. These are the different network operators. The contract was given, and these operators were Pac-Bell, Ameritech, MFS, and Sprint. Okay. Now every network operator that wanted to provide the backbone service, because the networking part is given to the commercial or the private people. So every network operator that wanted to provide this backbone service to the NSF regional networks, they had to connect to all the NAPs, 4 of the NAPs. Okay. So what happened? Every private player, the backbone carriers you can say, they were forced to compete for the regional networks business on the basis of service and price. Everyone wanted that this regional network should connect to us. So there was a price, and this was the commercialization actually. And during the 1990s, various other countries also, they also built their own networks. Some of them were patterned or based on ARPANET and NSFNet, like the European countries. So I'm talking about different countries. They also did this. For example, EuropaNet. You see this picture, EBON in Europe, and this all started with 2 Mbps. They upgraded it to 34 Mbps lines. And as we saw in the United States, here also the network which started with the government effort, it was also handed over to the industry, that is the private players, this network infrastructure, because there also it happened. Network infrastructure cannot be held by or cannot be handled by government player. Now here comes Tim Berners-Lee. He was the inventor of WWW. When then WWW came, internet exploded in early 1990s. Everyone was using internet. Initially at that time, it was used for email, for news groups, for remote login, for file transfer. But now the time has changed. Now we have real-time media distribution, the social media, Twitter, Facebook, these are there. Everyone is using it. And apart from that, the main traffic is coming from where? It is coming from Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube. All these are streaming videos platforms. The internet architecture. Now we talked about the evolution, history, etc. Now let us learn about the internet architecture, how actually it is working. What are the hardwares, etc. So we'll talk about that in the next discussion. Till then, thank you so much. Take care of yourself.